Something Wicked This Way Comes in Shakespeare, Book Two of Joy Rebar's Bay Browning series. Today we chat with the author about this fascinating novel in Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews. I'm Sharon Lynn, and welcome to you, Joy.
Hi, Sharon Lynn. It's nice to be here.
I'm
Always
glad
good
you
to
could
chat
make
with you.
it. All right, so a university summer theater production that just spells, nightmare to me right away. And then you add a wealthy son of donors and alumni gets killed on the set, and well, yeah, that's just absolute disaster. So. Had a great time with this book. So the theater production in question is kind of a spoof on Shakespeare. Why choose Shakespeare for this particular literary component? Because Bay is literary for this novel.
Well, I really liked teaching Shakespeare, and as much as scary as it can be for high school students to have to encounter Shakespeare, I loved taking it down to their level, and we did a lot of read alouds in class, which really brought it into like the idea that Shakespeare is meant to be performed, not necessarily read all by yourself. So I wanted to make Shakespeare fun and painless for people. So I wanted to bring it into the novel, but I wanted to bring it in a light way. So people won't have to put up with iambic pentameter and they won't have to worry about all the Shakespeare characters because there are,
Because they're all there.
hundreds. Yes, right. But what I wanted to do was kind of bring it down, bring it into our modern world and show that Shakespeare is still relevant. I mean, Shakespeare has all the character types and all of the problems and love and trust and deceit and all and finding oneself and all of those elements that are all part of human nature. So whether it's the 15th century or the 21st century, Shakespeare doesn't really change. Those things are all still relevant. And so I thought it would just be a fun way to show those parallels between his world and how they're still relevant today.
Absolutely. Just the greatest understanding of human nature. I mean, the number of smart characters who say stupid things and stupid characters who say really smart things, and characters who, like Hamlet, just knows exactly what is wrong with him and cannot fix it. Just doesn't have the capacity. And you see so many college students who are like that. So, yeah.
Indeed, you do, and that's why it was the perfect fodder for a college setting. And it just seemed, and I've been to so many summer Shakespeare theater productions, and people do Shakespeare in the park, and I thought, well, what a fun little twist to take Shakespeare and turn it into Shakespeared with the emphasis on speared and and make and make that into a murder mystery.
Well, can we see the cover of the book? Do you have that yet?
Yes. Yes.
And oh, that is just yay! It's
And it
wonderful.
I have a great cover designer, and she said she read it and she goes, I have this great pin cushion, and I'm like, pin cushion? What? And she goes, wait till I show it to you, and I'm like, oh, the colors and the fact that they're pins, the fact that it looks like a crown,
Yeah.
there's just so many references that go back to this cover that are in this book. So
Yeah,
I
that
was excited. I was like, boy,
costume
that was a better idea than I had.
absolutely wonderful. Um, so I want to talk about Bay specifically, who is your professor. She has a kind of a special ability of visual recollection. She can just really like just close her eyes and picture exactly what something looked like. Is that something that you can do, or is it something you're kind of envious of, so you put it in your character?
Yeah, I can't. And and I have a friend who can, and it is completely remarkable and annoying at the same time. Sometimes she drives me absolutely crazy because she recalls every minute detail of everything. And is always willing to relay that to me, especially if I stumble and say, "Oh, I thought we were here," or I mean, she went down to the color and the style and location, everything. Um, I gave that to Bay because I wanted her to have a special ability. She is she feels like she's been left out of the special ability category in her family. So I don't even think that she is self-aware enough to understand that she has these powers of observation. But it's because she's such an introvert, I think, that she can lay back and just be ultra observant. But she also does not realize that that is a gift.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, left out of the special ability. Her sisters both have a little bit of psychic ability, especially when they touch someone. So I love just the tiny little bits of magic in this, how I feel like they're magic.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah. So, well, actually, let's go to Bay's sister, Cassandra, who in Greek mythology, she was a prophet, but nobody believed her, which is just a horrible, horrible curse. So, why give Cass this kind of heritage, basically?
Yeah, I'm actually in awe of how the Greeks were able to create so many multifaceted gods and goddesses and in that realm. And to give this kind of a gift of prophecy to a woman who is powerless and and it's certainly like a mirror of the of Greek society at the time to offer that kind of a gift when she could have great power if anybody would just listen to her. And when I thought about that and decided to name my character Cassandra, I thought, well, she could have that same gift. But again, there's an arc to it. So in her young life, she too knows things, but people would either push her away or they'd say, "Oh, she's having one of her moments or she's having one of her spells or something like that." So it was seen as a negative thing. So she had to deal with that. Then in her life as a grifter, she
Yeah,
could use
and
that
she didn't
gift to her
necessarily deal with it
advantage.
well.
Yes, she could use it to her advantage, but not for good. So now we kind of have come full circle. Now she's in this other realm where she's rehabilitated herself and it's still sometimes a rocky road. And she's trying to wrestle with this idea of, I want to keep this gift as much a secret as possible because I want to figure out what I can do with it and can I do something good with it instead of something naughty with it. So I wanted it to be part of her arc.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she's a wonderful character. And I love so much that in this novel, because in Medusa Murders, she and her sister had a very rocky relationship. And I kind of love in this one that they just, they sit down, they've been gardening together, they have tea. I'm really enjoying watching their relationship blossom. So that's fun.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Me too. Me too. Because there definitely needed to be an evolution. You can only have so much conflict for so long. And I'm not I know you have to have conflict in your books, but I'm a non-conflict person. I don't like conflict at all. So I'm always looking for how can I move this along from conflict to something better and yet make it believable because it has to be incremental, but they've come a long way since Medusa Murders.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's wonderful to watch. Um, so okay, there are times when Bay just does things that make me cringe. I just it's I will actually say out loud while I'm reading, stop it. And like she's been told to leave in no uncertain terms. And so she goes out the front door and then sneaks around to the back door. Um, so um just kind of wondering why make her that level of rule breaker.
I think for for Bay. she has been such a she's a strict rule follower her entire life. She has always been the good girl in the family. And so she's not broken rules and she's not even bent any rules. And I think as Cass comes into her life, Cass shows her that there are times when bending rules is necessary and fun and fun. I think there's a little fun there. But I think it's also Bay trying to grow into herself and trying to say, maybe I need to take a few risks in order to have a more fulfilling life. And, in the first novel, the police kind of give her license to help with a murder investigation. And now in the second novel, even though she hasn't been given a license to do it, she decides that that's the path maybe she's destined for, or maybe she's just curious enough to want to take a few risks.
Yeah.
And I'm not that person. And that's another
That's
reason
me.
why I love to make her that person, because that's the person that sometimes I would like to be, but I'm not that bold.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, why don't you go up there and do that? Yeah, that's
I'll watch.
yeah, exactly. I'll be back here.
I'll
I'll
be
call
here with my
911 if we need
phone.
to. Um, yeah, and there are risks that I would like her to take that she's being really stubborn about. But I'm
Yep.
sure she will.
She's a slow mover.
Yeah, a date, darn it. Um, Um, all right, so you have this society set up in this novel where the wealthy people are up on Bird Ridge and they're known as the Birds and um, they're wealthy, Prairie Ridge. So are these families based on any families that you know in Wisconsin or Chicago? Is there that level of society that's kind of apart?
There are, and for this particular book, Prairie Ridge is loosely based on a medium-sized, very medium-sized, or I would say a medium-sized town or a small city called Sun Prairie. It's outside of Madison. And so I went to the Sun Prairie Historical Society to do some research on their history because I wanted the Prairie Ridge High Society people to be based at least partly on the occupations or to see what was out there about the founding families. And there are these founding families called the Birds and the Angels. Honestly, I didn't make that up, but it's angel with two L's, but it is. So that's why I created this bird angel bluff, and then we called them, and then we call them the bluff birds. Okay, that bluff birds thing didn't exist, but there were definitely founding families, and there were also conflicts. There's some fun anecdotal reads in there about religious conflicts and ethnic conflicts among people who settled the town. And I thought, well, this is a real easy thing to just carry on over into the legacy of how this town came together. Um, in the town I grew up in, we had an end of town. I was in a small town, but we had an end of town and it was always called Hog Ridge. Okay. It's only called Hog Ridge because it was where the very affluent families, the people who had the most prestigious positions in the town and founding families, they lived there and the homes were and still are beautiful. And they were a little apart. They did look a little down on people who were not as affluent as they were. And so I've had encounters with wealthy people who are very nice and good and kind-hearted, and I've had encounters with wealthy people who are very snobby. So I think there's always a mixture, no matter which social class you're in, but I think the class conflict is always a relevant thing. Even today, even though we don't have royalty in our society, we have that unwritten royalty.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, all right. So there you probably know that I have taught Shakespeare as well. And there are
Yes.
Shakespeare quotes at the beginning of every chapter, which I love. And you even had one from Troilus and Cressida, which nobody's ever heard of. Uh, so I was just kind of wondering, did you have some of these quotes in mind where you're like, okay, that's going to have to drop in here and that's going to have to drop in here? Or did you write everything and then start looking for, because of course Shakespeare has a quote for every situation.
He does. Um, I had a few that I had already could pull out of my back pocket from from teaching Shakespeare myself. But, I certainly didn't have all of those committed to memory, and there were some that I didn't know about at all. So I had my little list of like, I know where this is going to fit. And then I had other chapters where I wrote the chapter and I said, the real prevalent message I want people to get out of this chapter is something about deception, or, something where I can lead them to a clue, or something about a party, or something about love, so then I just did a lot of looking up, and I have this wonderful reference book called Shakespeare A to Z. You might have heard of it. Anyway, it is the perfect ultimate reference guide because you can just go in there and you can pull out bits and pieces anytime you need them. And so that's what I did. So it was a mixture of both, but there was a lot of looking for the appropriate quote after the fact.
Oh
And I
my,
wanted to do a mix of the plays. So I didn't always want to be reliant. There's so many good things sometimes that come out of, two or three of the big plays, but I'm like, I just don't want to rely on those. Some of these other ones have really good little nuggets,
yeah,
They're just
I was
little
excited to
gems.
see some of those, obscure ones sneak on in. Because you can just guide your entire life around Hamlet. But
Yes. Or Macbeth. Depending on what you're writing about.
yeah, yeah. Well, especially if you're doing something murdery and
Yeah.
a lot of deceit and
Deceptive.
betrayal
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
bad behavior. That
Yeah.
Scottish play is your go-to.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so we see pieces of the play as we're reading, which is very, very fun. And it is something that Bay wrote specifically for this summer production. Have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever written a little skit or scene or entire play for people to perform?
Well, I've never written an entire play. We did some skit writing in for forensics. I was a high school forensics coach for several years. So maybe, and I'm talking about minuscule because they get 8 minutes. So, there's so nothing large. But when I had this idea, I the idea came to me and I did a little outline of the idea so I could divide up each act and figure out who the principal players were in that act and the whole idea of having a Shakespeare talk show, kind of bringing it back into the modern world because I thought that all of his stuff is ripe for talk show, banter and conflict. And I thought, boy, that would be so much fun to write. And then someone said, well, you should write it. And then I thought, well, let me start trying to write it. And then I said, oh, I don't have time to write this right now. I have to like
But I can write
set
bits
that aside. It would be a really fun companion piece to do, but it's probably more work than the novel
of
because
it.
you're
It's a
trying to
different
write
mind. It's an entirely different set of skills to write a play. Plays are all dialogue. Uh,
right.
yeah.
And then if you're thinking of being true to iambic pentameter, and then you have to decide, am I all in on iambic pentameter or am I going to just ditch it and use some of Shakespeare's words, but in modern conversational language instead? So
Yeah.
there was too much to consider. How fun though, how fun it would be.
Well, yeah. Well, it certainly came off like it's like, all right, this thing exists and it can be performed. So that was really fun. Um, and especially in a this summer production, that's just
Yes. Yeah, for
um,
sure.
so, give us a little insight into directing theater. Bay goes through notes, for example, with her actors at the end of every scene or, every rehearsal. So, tell us a little bit about directing. Have you ever directed things of that nature?
I've done a little directing. I directed again at the high school level. I have been in a
That's the
lot
hardest level.
of pain. Yeah, it's hard to get them to continue to focus and then to work around their own little dramas because one day someone likes someone and the next day they hate that person. Yeah, just it's like an entire a play within a play. Um,
Noisy Song is the perfect example.
right, right. But I've done a lot of community theater where I've been on the other side of directing. I've acted in a lot of community theater plays, so I know what's involved in directing, and I've been given a lot of director notes. But I think people think that it's easy to put on a production, and
Hey
and
kids,
they
let's get on a
don't.
show.
I just don't know. Yeah, right, exactly. And they don't know how much work is involved and that you really do have to start out with a read through and that you actually as a lot of directors will get their characters that are working in pairs to go that to rehearse to practice on their own and find chemistry and you have to find sometimes it's a lot easier to find the I hate you chemistry than it is to find that like oh boy this what is this love interest magic chemistry because to bring that when you know that you have your husband and they have their wife and they, watching from
Like
behind
back
the
off, back off,
scenes
back off.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, you don't just get to dress rehearsal and say, okay, well, now we're going to do that kiss. Oh gosh, no. I mean, you really actually have to practice and you got to work your way there. And so that's how it is always with those with chemistry and those emotions and even just knowing where to stand or what am I doing with my hand here? Do I have a prop to hold on to and where do I walk? Am I going to run into somebody? Am I going to run into furniture? Just the idea of setting up blocking and movement and starting off with in baby steps. Let's just sit down here in around a table and read this play and then let's read it again and I'm going to stop you as a director and say no 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 you are totally reading that wrong you don't have the right idea here at all and just trying to get your cast to understand your characters or to understand your vision because every director has their own vision.
Why we've been, performing Shakespeare for 500 years. Every director has a different vision of what is important in this play.
And there's so many ways to perform it. I have seen Shakespeare done in the time period it was meant for. I've seen it done modern. I've seen it done urban. There's just a lot of great ways you can pull Shakespeare out off,
I saw
and
a
pull it
production
off well.
of Othello set in the United States Civil War, and it was so
Yeah.
poignant. Just, just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they
How
didn't,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah, didn't change a
Mhm.
single word. It was all just the setting. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool. Very
I,
cool.
I, I, I often think that people don't understand what a director actually does. And, it's like going through the script and moving every character like they're on a chessboard and
Right.
then having to, see the actors do that. And if it's too clunky, it's like, okay, well, what will you do? And, just can be a very organic process or it can be very prescriptive. It's like, no, you must do this right here. And it just really depends on the director, it depends on how they interact with their actors. It's hard. I don't like directing. I'm not good at it. It's
No,
not
no.
bossy.
I think I take direction way better than I would give it because I think that I think I'm too nice. Well, I mean,
Right.
I have
Right.
directors who will come over and go, "Let me physically move you because you certainly cannot. You are just standing incorrectly, and I've had enough now. So I'm basically turn your body and you are going to do this with your arm." And I'm like, wow, okay, that is hands-on direction. And sometimes and that person was a great director. They just were. But I don't know that I could do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's a fun aspect of the book to see this part of Bay. Just like working, being patient when she wants to kill them because they're being idiots and because they are. They're college students.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
love college students partly because they have their own minds and they have their own opinions and they are going to do what they're going to do. So
And
yeah,
they're still
rather
not
than
grown up. I mean,
Right.
we call them adults, and yet some of them are so far from adulthood.
Yeah. 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 Well, boys' brains don't finish growing until they're 26. So they're not actually.
Right. I mean, right. I mean, I think I had a reader, an ARC reader who took me to task and said, it doesn't seem like anybody feels very bad that this kid got killed. And it's like, yeah, you're right, because he had such a reputation for being a player and a privileged jerk, entitled jerk. And I thought about changing that and trying to, find a way to add a little more empathy for that victim. But then at the same time, I thought, honestly, I mean, it's pretty true to life that there, I mean,
Well, yeah,
it's sad
especially.
to say, but it is true to life.
Yeah, and especially with college students, because I probably in 5 years, each of them are going to need to see a therapist about this and the way they acted and all of those things. But
Oh,
in
for
the
real.
moment,
Yeah.
it's spot on.
Yep.
Yeah. So, what is next for Bay and also for Joy?
So the third book is called Poetry Slammed, and and it will be thematically related to poetry. Um, surprise,
What a
surprise.
surprise!
And there are a couple loose threads that are left over to pull into the third book, and everything will be tied up pretty neatly in that third book in terms of things that are where Cass has kind of had to bounce off in her life and deal with some pretty heavy emotional stuff. And so, that's just going to be that's going to actually come together and merge into the plot that they will be involved in, which will be her own colleague from her English department who will go missing after discovering a brand new poem left behind by Emily Dickinson.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that's what is next. So that is what I'm almost ready to write it. It's quite it's outlined in pretty good detail for me because I don't usually do a lot of detailed stuff. But yeah, it's ready for me to start to get off our, no, I shouldn't say get on my seat and start writing. And then, and
Sit
then I'm
yourself
also
down.
yeah. And I also have to figure out what I want to do with Frankie Champagne and my Deep Lakes. I left her in a really good place. So I'm kind of letting her sit and simmer for a little bit until
Yeah,
I get Poetry Slam written.
she's doing okay. Her daughter's doing okay. The winery's doing okay, but I I miss her.
I do too. I do too. And I know
And
I'll miss her a lot by the
the
time I get
town.
done with this third book.
Yeah.
But
So
sometimes you have to go where you're called, right?
right. Well, I'm really excited about this series too because yeah,
Thank
just
you.
keep writing, Joy. That's
Thank you.
kind of the
Thank
message
you. Thanks
here.
for saying that.
Want to read them all.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I thoroughly love following your college student protagonist around England too. It's a really good time. And I also get mad at her.
Oh yeah, because yeah, she does stupid things.
Well, yes, because she's 19 mostly. She's
Right.
very relatable though. It's you don't forget how silly and dumb and naive you were either when you were 19.
Right. And you think you know everything because again, you feel like a grown up and you kind of look like a grown up, but then it's like the lack of judgment just
Right. Right. And Maddie definitely goes from one, like jumps from the frying pan to the fire and then back to the frying pan, then back to the fire.
especially in Death Plays with Fire, which is the most recent.
Especially, yes, especially in that, yes, especially in Death
Death Plays
plays
with
with
Fire.
fire, plays with fire. I'm like, I keep thinking takes. It's like it's not takes, plays with fire. Yes, I mean Where there's smoke, there's fire in that book every time. So
Every time.
people have
And
to
she
be
finds
ready.
it and it's always bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Thank you for being here. Where can our fans find you? Social medias.
Well, um, if they're interested in news and like little tidbits along with some free short story pieces, they can go to my Substack, which is Joy. I think it's just Joy Ann Ribar Mystery Author on Substack, and it's just a free follow, and it comes in people's emails, so that's an easy one. You can find me on social media on Facebook or Instagram, again, just under Joy Ann Ribar.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. We were so glad to have you, and thank you for this book. It is so much fun to read. Um,
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks for reading and being an early reader. It's just a treasure to have people who are willing to do that.
yeah, it is, but in this case, I was honored. So,
Thank you.
um, and thank you to all of our followers for watching Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews.
Uh, Indeed. Hello and bye, everybody. I hope to see you around the digital world.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.